At this point, it almost seems that licensed Funko Pop figurines are being birthed into the world at a greater rate than actual human babies. So it makes sense that someone finally scooped up a bunch of these block-headed bookshelf warmers and stuck them in their own video game. Funko Fusion structures its campaign around 7 beloved TV shows and films, including Masters of the Universe and Jurassic World, and stuffs it with iconic pop culture cameos from Marty McFly to Mega Man. However, despite the fact it certainly appears faithful to the distinctive Funko style at first glance, its meaningless story, mind-numbingly repetitive mission design, and maddening game-breaking bugs cause the whole thing to topple over like a doll with a head that's too big for its body. Not unlike LEGO Star Wars The Skywalker Saga, Funko Fusion is a third-person shooter spin on the tried and tested LEGO video game formula, right down to the way literally every object around you can be belligerently smashed into studs. Sorry, chunks of vinyl. Its eclectic handful of familiar stories can be played in any order, but while I opted to open with Hot Fuzz and close with Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, the sequence I chose didn't really seem to have any impact on the paper-thin overarching storyline, which centers around a good versus evil battle between Funko Freddy and the nefarious Eddie Funko. These two Funko faces may be familiar to the more dedicated Funko collectors, but from where I'm sitting, the less said about these thoroughly uninteresting and underdeveloped arch-rivals, the better. Across each of the 7 sub-stories, levels typically rehash the same escort missions and fetch quest formats, and also tend to copy and paste encounters to artificially lengthen each stage to absolutely painful degrees. This is before each sub-story culminates in a boss fight that are each structured in the same enormously unsatisfying way, where you must blast purple blobs off a big bad's body while fending off its crowding minions, until you have enough purple goo to fill a towering Funko flask. At that point, you can trigger the arrival of a super-sized pop to finish the monster off for you, while you shoot vinyl chunks out of its body on autopilot and try not to look bored until the cutscene comes. In fact, combat in general is pretty arduous. At first it feels satisfying enough to Funko pop the enemy Funko heads off their little Funko shoulders, but it quickly becomes tedious as you plow through these big-headed hordes in waves that are limited at certain times and annoyingly never-ending in others. It gets old pretty Funko fast. Credit where it's due, the team at developer 1010 Games has done an admirable job at recreating the super deformed vinyl idols and placing them in some attractive little toy towns to roam around in. I was initially delighted to follow that meddling swan through the quaint village streets of Sanford when I started the Hot Fuzz campaign, and the swirling cartoon explosions in Master of the Universe's Eternia were also a welcome touch. There's clearly been a lot of work poured into crafting the look and feel of Funko Fusion, and plenty of Easter eggs to hunt for in its various worlds too. Yet while Funko Fusion is absolutely teeming with recognizable characters and locations, it possesses surprisingly little of its own personality. Whereas I've regularly chuckled through most LEGO games in the past as a result of the many clever comedic touches they bring to each licensed adventure, I barely laughed at all during Funko Fusion's campaign. For the most part, the absence of character voices and complete lack of facial expressions makes it very hard for these figurine fighters to seem like anything but charmless empty vessels, in place of where some of my favourite fictional characters should be. When Adam raises the power sword with a completely nonplussed look on his face, it's the accompanying He-Man theme song that's really doing all the heavy lifting. Outside of the odd static speech bubble, its cast of characters don't really speak at all, and Funko Fusion itself is equally poor when it comes to communication. Mission objectives are often incredibly obtuse and lacking in any signposting, which leads to enormous amounts of backtracking, particularly since so many of its puzzles rely on return trips to vending machines in order to craft jump pads and gas canisters and the like. In fact, I think I visited more virtual vending machines in Funko Fusion than I have in every Like a Dragon game combined. That's to say nothing of the absolutely obnoxious invisible walls that make exploring its environments regularly mystifying, if not downright irritating. Just because you can use a jump pad to successfully leap above the height of a gate that's blocking your path in this Shaun of the Dead bonus stage, doesn't mean that Funko Fusion is going to allow you to clear it. What's the matter, Funko Fusion? Never taken a shortcut before? Worse still, Funko Fusion doesn't make it clear early on that you need 45 golden crowns in order to unlock its final story battle. After completing the 7 main story quests, I had only accrued 38 of them, which meant that I had to turn heel and go back through the levels I'd already completed, searching for special cameo quests to harvest the extra crowns from, which put my story progress on pause for a full 3 hours. As it turns out, I needn't have bothered, since the final boss fight was a 45-minute slog punctuated by an entirely anticlimactic endgame cutscene that closed the story with less of a Funko Pop and more of a burst bubble.
Life is pain. It is chaos and rage.
While most serious collectors like to keep their Funko Pops pristine, Funko Fusion has unfortunately arrived in stores a bit box damaged, at least if the launch PlayStation 5 version that I played is anything to go by. In addition to relatively minor presentational problems like cutscenes freezing and loading screen crashes, I've experienced a lengthy list of more damaging bugs like puzzles breaking and preventing me from progressing, my character disappearing completely for entire levels, and I've also found myself trapped in vending machine screens unable to escape. Wait, how am I moving around behind the vending machine now? And why am I being attacked by enemies? What the actual Funko? Meanwhile, I was unable to actually finish this Shaun of the Dead level because the car I was escorting just completely refused to move while I was bombarded with endless waves of zombies. Why? Because this zombie had glitched into a piece of scenery within the danger radius of the car, preventing it from getting a move on. And since it was completely immune to my attacks, the level had to be restarted from the beginning.
Oh, what?
Of the 20 hours it took me to complete Funko Fusion's story, I'd estimate that close to a quarter of that time was just me redoing the levels that managed to break during my first time through. The developers have assured me that they're working on patch fixes to remedy some of the issues I encountered during my playthrough, yet even with these rough edges smoothed out, I can't really see Funko Fusion appealing to any particular audience, because it's so hard to figure out exactly who it's intended for. Its button-mashy combat and cutesy characters make it seem like it's targeted towards more junior players, but some of its most prominently featured licenses, like Hot Fuzz and The Thing, feel far more skewed towards adults who've actually seen those mature movies. Unlike the LEGO video games that typically take the darker moments of Harry Potter or Star Wars and spin them into a cheeky moment of slapstick, Funko Fusion just presents the grisliest moments of these licenses, more or less as is. Here's Hot Fuzz's villainous Simon Skinner impaling himself on a miniature church steeple. And here's Copper's hands getting violently chomped off by Norris's teeth-filled torso in The Thing. And here's 1978's Battlestar Galactica. It's not particularly violent, but it's also not exactly popular with grade school kids in 2024 either. Maybe its incongruous grab bag of licenses is meant to appeal to both parents and kids at the same time, but there's no co-op support at launch, and although it has been promised to be added at a later date, it will apparently be online only, which won't facilitate families playing it on the couch together anyway.
Player 2 has left the game.
I'm really struggling to figure out exactly who Funko Fusion is for, but what I do know for certain is that it's definitely not for me. Funko Fusion has no shortage of oversized heads, but between them all it still manages to contain precious little in the way of interesting new ideas. Its simplistic shooting is dull, its many bugs and backtracking requirements are exhausting, and its peculiar marriage of child-pleasing character styles and LEGO-like level design with a number of film and television licenses that are distinctly adult just seems ill-advised from the jump. Although it definitely nails the signature look of the pint-sized collectibles, it's really not much fun to play, which means that just like your Funko Pop collection, it's probably best left on the shelf. For more IGN reviews, check out our verdicts on Harry Potter Quidditch Champions and NBA 2K25, and for everything else, stick with IGN.